Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the audiobook series by Novus Reader 253. So, we'll be starting with our first book, that is Letter to His Father by Franz Kafka. So, without further ado, let's get started. If you have the book, you can read along with me, otherwise, enjoy the audio series. Letter to His Father. Dearest Father, you asked me recently why I maintain that I'm afraid of you. As usual, I was unable to think of any answer to your question, partially for the very reason that I'm afraid of you, and partially because an explanation of the grounds for this fear would mean going into far more details than I could even approximately keep in mind while talking. And if I now try to give you an answer in writing, it will still be very incomplete, because even in writing, this fear and its consequences hamper me in relation to you. And because the magnitude of the subject goes far beyond the scope of my memory and power of reasoning. To you, the matter always seemed very simple, at least in so far as you talked about it in front of me, and indiscriminately in front of many other people. It looked to you more or less as follows. You have worked hard all your life, have sacrificed everything for your children, above all, for me. Consequently, I have lived high and handsome, have been completely at liberty to learn whatever I wanted, and have had no cause for material worries, which means worries of any kind at all. You have not expected any gratitude for this, knowing what children's gratitude is like, but have expected at least some sort of obligingness, some sign of sympathy. Instead, I have always hidden from you, in my room, among my books, with crazy friends or with crackpot ideas. I have never talked to you frankly. I have never come to you when you were in the synagogue, never visited you at Francensbert, nor indeed ever shown any family feeling. I have never taken any interest in the business or your other concerns. I saddled you with the factory and walked off. I encouraged Otla in her obstinacy and never lifted a finger for you, never even got you a theatre ticket, while I do everything for my friends. If you sum up your judgment of me, the result you get is that although you don't charge me with anything downright improper or wicked, with the exception perhaps of my latest marriage plan, you do charge me with coldness, estrangements, and ingratitude. And what is more, you charge me with it in such a way as to make it seem my fault, as though I might have been able, with something like a touch on the steering wheel, to make everything quite different, while you aren't in the slightest to blame, unless it be for having been too good to me. This, your usual way of representing it, I regard as accurate only in so far as I too believe you are entirely blameless in the matter of our estrangement. But I'm equally entirely blameless. If I could get you to acknowledge this, then what would be possible is, not I think, a new life. We are both much too old for that, but still a kind of peace, no cessation, but still a diminution of your unceasing reproaches. Oddly enough, you have some sort of notion of what I mean. For instance, a short time ago you said to me, I have always been fond of you, even though outwardly I didn't act toward you as other fathers generally do, and this precisely is because I can't pretend as other people can. Now, Father, on the whole, I have never doubted your goodness towards me, but this remark I consider wrong. You can't pretend that is true. But merely for that reason to maintain that other fathers pretend is either mere opinionatedness, and as such beyond discussion, or on the other hand, and this is in my view what it really is, a veiled expression of the fact that something is wrong in our relationship, and that you have played your part in causing it to be so. But without it being your fault, if it really meant that, then we are in agreement. I'm not going to say, of course, that I have become what I am only as a result of your influence. That would be very much exaggerated, and I'm indeed inclined to this exaggeration. It is indeed quite possible that even if I had grown up entirely free from your influence, I still could not have become a person after your own heart. I should probably have still become a weakly, timid, hesitant, restless person, neither Robert Kafka nor Carl Herman, but yet quite differently from what I really am. And we might have got on with each other excellently. I should have been happy to have you as a friend, as a boss, an uncle, a grandfather, even though rather more hesitantly as a father in law. Only as a father you have been too strong for me, particularly since my brothers died when they were small and my sisters came along only much later, so that I alone had to bear the brunt of it, and for that I was much too weak. Compare the two of us. I, to put it in a very much abbreviated form, a Lowey with a certain Kafka component, which, however, is not to set in motion by the Kafka will to life, business, and conquest, but by a low spur that impels more secretly, more diffidently, and in another direction, and which often fails to work entirely. You, on the other hand, a true Kafka in strength, health, appetite, loudness of voice, eloquence, self satisfaction, worldly dominance, endurance, presence of mind, knowledge of human nature, a certain way of doing things on a grand scale, of course, all with all the defects and weaknesses that go with these advantages, and into which your temperament and sometimes your hot temper drive you. You are perhaps not wholly a Kafka in your general outlook, insofar as I can compare you with Uncle Philip, Ludwig, and Heinrich. That is odd, and here I don't see quite clear either. After all, they were all more cheerful, fresher, more informal, more easygoing, less severe than you. In this, by the way, I have inherited a great deal from you and taken much too good care of my inheritance without admittedly having the necessary counterweights in my own nature as you have. Yet you too, on the other hand, have in this respect gone through various phases. You are perhaps more cheerful because you were disappointed by your children, especially by me, and you were depressed at home when other people came in. You were quite different. Perhaps you have become more cheerful again since then, now that your grandchildren and your son in law again give you something of that warmth which your children, except perhaps Vali, could not give you. In any case, we were so different and in our difference so dangerous to each other that if anyone had tried to calculate in advance how I, the slowly developing child, and you, the full grown man, would behave toward one another, he could have assumed that you would simply trample me underfoot so that nothing was left of me. Well, that did not happen. Nothing alive can be calculated. But perhaps something worse happened. And in saying this, I would all the time beg of you not to forget that I never, and not even for a single moment, believe any guilt to be on your side. The effect you had on me was the effect you could not help having. But you should stop considering it some particular malice on my part that I succumbed to that effect. I was a timid child, for all that I am sure I was also obstinate, as children are. I'm sure that mother spoiled me too, but I cannot believe I was particularly difficult to manage. I cannot believe that a kindly word, a quiet taking by the hand, a friendly look could not have got me to do anything that was wanted of me. Now you are, after all, basically a charitable and kind hearted person. What follows will not be in contradiction to this. I'm speaking only of the impression you made on the child. But not every child has the endurance and fearlessness to go on searching until it comes to the kindliness that lies beneath the surface. You can treat a child only in the way you yourself are constituted, with vigor, noise, and hot temper. And in this case, such behavior seemed to you to be also most appropriate because you wanted to bring me up to be a strong, brave boy. Your education methods in the very early years I can't, of course, directly describe today. but I can more or less imagine them by drawing conclusions from the later years and from your treatment of Felix. What must be considered as heightening the effect is that you were then younger and hence more energetic, wilder, more primitive, and still more reckless than you are today, that you were, besides, completely tied to the business, scarcely able to be with me even once a day, and therefore made all the more profound impression on me, one that never really leveled out to the flatness of habit. There is only one episode in the early years of which I have a direct memory. You may remember it too. One night I kept on whimpering for water, not, I am certain, because I was thirsty, but probably partially to be annoying, partially to amuse myself. After several vigorous threats had failed to have any effect, you took me out of bed, carried me out onto the pavilish, and left me there alone for a while in my nightshirt, outside the shut door. I'm not going to say that this was wrong. Perhaps there was really no other way of getting peace and quiet that night. But I mention it as a typical of your methods of bringing up a child and their effect on me. I dare say I was quite obedient afterward at that period. But it did me inner harm. What was for me a matter of course was that senseless asking for water, and then the extraordinary terror of being carried outside were two things that I, my nature being what it was, could never properly connect with each other. Even years afterward, I suffered from the tormenting fancy that the huge man, my father, the ultimate authority, would not come almost for no reason at all and take me out of bed in the night and carry me out onto the pavilish, and that consequently I meant absolutely nothing as far as he was concerned. Side note, when we talk about pavilish, it's the Czech word for the long balcony in the inner courtyard of old houses in Prague. Continuing the excerpt. That was only a small beginning, but this feeling of being nothing that often dominates me, a feeling that is in another respect admittedly also a noble and fruitful one, comes largely from your influence. What I would have needed was a little encouragement, a little friendliness, a little keeping open of my road, instead of which you blocked it for me, though of course with the good intention of making me take another road. But I was not fit for that. You encouraged me, for instance, when I saluted and marched smartly. But I was no future soldier, or you encouraged me when I was able to eat heartily or even drink beer with my meals, or when I was able to repeat songs, singing what I had not understood, or prattle to you using your own favorite expressions, imitating you, but nothing of this had anything to do with my future. And it is characteristic that even today you really only encourage me in anything when you yourself are involved in it. When what is at stake is your own sense of self importance, which I damage, for instance, by my intended marriage, or which is damaged in me, for instance, when Peppa is abusive to me. Then I receive encouragement, I'm reminded of my worth. The matches I would be entitled to make are pointed out to me, and Peppa is condemned utterly. But apart from the fact that at my age I'm already nearly unsusceptible to encouragement, what help could it be to me anyway, if it only comes when it isn't primarily a matter of myself at all? At that time, and at that time in every way, I would have needed encouragement. I was after all weighed down by your mere physical presence. I remember, for instance, how we often undressed in the same bathing hut. There was I, skinny, weakly, slight, and you, strong, tall, broad. Even inside the hut, I felt a miserable specimen. And what's more, not only in your eyes, but in the eyes of the whole world. For you were for me in the measure of all things. But then, when we stepped out of the bathing hut before the people, you holding me by my hand, a little skeleton, unsteady, barefoot on the boards, frightened of the water, incapable of copying your swimming strokes, which you, with the best of intentions, but actually to my profound humiliation, kept on demonstrating. Then I was frantic with desperation, and at such moments, all my bad experiences in all areas fitted magnificently together. I felt best when you sometimes undressed first and I was able to stay behind in the hut alone and put off the disgrace of showing myself in public. At last you came to see what I was doing and drove me out of the hut. I was grateful to you for not seeming to notice my anguish. And besides, I was proud of my father's body. By the way, this difference between us remains much the same to this very day. In keeping furthermore was your intellectual domination. You had worked your way so far up by your own energies alone, and as a result, you had unbounded confidence in your opinion. That was not yet so dazzling for me, a child, as later for the boy growing up. From your armchair, you ruled the world. Your opinion was correct. Every other was mal, wild, mishag, not normal. Your self confidence indeed was so great that you had no need to be considered at all and yet never ceased to be in the right. I did sometimes happen that you had no opinions whatsoever about a matter, and as a result, every conceivable opinion with respect to the matter was necessarily wrong, without exception. You were capable, for instance, of running down the Czechs, and then the Germans, and then the Jews, and what is more, not only selectively but in every respect. And finally, nobody was left except yourself. For me, you took on the enigmatic quality that all tyrants have whose rights are based on their person and not on reason. At least so it seemed to me. Now, when I was a subject, you were actually astonishingly often right, which in conversation was not surprising, for there was hardly ever any conversation between us, but also in reality. Yet this was nothing particularly incomprehensible either. In all my thinking, I was, after all, under the heavy pressure of your personality. Even in that part of it, and particularly in that which was not in accord with yours, all these thoughts, seemingly independent of you, were from the beginning burdened with your belittling judgments. It was almost impossible to endure this and still work out a thought with any measure of completeness and permanence. I'm not here speaking of any sublime thoughts, but of every little childhood enterprise. It was only necessary to be happy about something or other, to be fitted with the thought of it, to come home and speak of it. And the answer was an ironic sigh, a shaking of the head, a tapping on the table with a finger. Is that all you're so worked up about? Or such worries I like to have? Or the things some people have time to think about? Or where is this going to get you? Or what a song and dance about nothing? Of course, you couldn't be expected to be enthusiastic about every childish triviality when you were in a state of vexation and worry. But that was not the point. Rather, by virtue of your antagonistic nature, you could not help but always and inevitably cause the child such disappointments, and further this antagonism, accumulating material, was constantly intensified. Eventually, the pattern expressed itself even if, for once, you were of the same opinion as I. Finally, these disappointments of the child were not the ordinary disappointments of life, but since they involved you, the all important personage, they struck to the very core. Courage, resolution, confidence, delight in this and that could not last when you were against it, or even your opposition was merely to be assumed. And it was to be assumed in almost everything I did. Thank you for joining this audiobook session. We'll continue from this page, that is 12, where we'll begin off with this apply to people as well as thoughts. That is part 11 of this letter. So I'll see you very soon for part 2 of this audiobook. Till then, keep connecting and keep reading between the lines. Bye.